Hey, what's going on everyone? Jason from Clocked here, and I'm going to talk to you about a genre of games that means the world to me. Let me just explain why I love on-rail shooters. So what's an on-rail shooter? Well, let's roll it back, people. Let's roll it back. Let me explain. So, growing up in the arcades, shooters were everything to me, and certainly a massive staple of the arcade scene ever since the likes of Space Invaders. But like many genres in gaming, many can easily and nicely break off into subsections and become in many ways their own unique things. And on-rail shooters, as a subgenre of the classic shooters, are no exception, people. And although niche to somewhat non-existent in today's gaming world, save for the few sporadic low-budget entries, on-rail shooters, once turned the arcade scene upside down. Had a massive cultural impact and were elevated to newer levels on home consoles, creating industry-known and industry-changing IPs, many of which remain as personal favorites for myself to this day, which I also still actively play. So, as I said in the intro, what is an on-rail shooter? As stated, an on-rail shooter is a sub-genre of the classic shooters of old, the likes of Space Invaders, Xevious, R-Type, Gradius, and so forth. But unlike how these classic style of shooters deal with certain perspectives, and gameplay being mostly vertical, isometric, or horizontal in their shooting planes of view, on-rail shooters primarily focus from a behind-the-camera perspective, had the movement of the game on autopilot moving forwards, mostly out of the player control, hence why it's called on rails, almost like you're strapped to a train on a train track constantly moving forwards on a fixed path. They also had fixed camera set pieces through linear paths where the player couldn't control the camera at all, and required the player to shoot enemies on screen before the enemy attacks hit their field of view. The other arguably most recognizable subgenre of the classic shooter, which entered the realms of the on-rails shooter genre, is what became known as the arcade shooter, or the light gun shooter to be more precise. This subgenre focused primarily on a first-person perspective, where you'd either target the enemies on screen with a reticule, or by pointing a light gun at the enemy and pulling the trigger to register the point of attack on the screen, which you would have manually targeted. This also meant that in first person, all areas on the screen were your hitbox essentially. These included games like The House of the Dead and Virtual Cop as classic examples, or even more somewhat modern, like console shooters in the vein of Dead Space Extraction or Resident Evil Dark Side Chronicles. But for this video, I'm here to talk about the other subgenre of the rail shooter, one which evolved the genre even further: third-person on-rails shooter. I think the best ways to show this is by me explaining what I feel are the three core principles of a third-person on-rails shooter which differentiate the genre from its other siblings. 1. The character is the center of attention. So, you always see your character on the screen. This is clearly different from my first-person perspective, right? And the camera is always behind the player character as well, even in third person. But, different from your traditional light gun on-rail shooter, character movement around the screen is possible in third person. It could be subtle or even full screen, But most importantly, for the third-person on-rail shooter, all damage taken is when that character itself is hit by enemy attacks, not just simply any part of the screen like a light gun shooter. Number 2, you are still on rails, but can have flexibility. So, you still have no control over the direction of forwards movement through these set pieces, but at times, you can sometimes slow down manually, boost momentarily forwards, or even fight with melee attacks on a spot or if enemies come close to you. With a sudden change and a sudden innovation with some third-person on-rail shooters, there were slight changes to camera angles that you could do, which I'll get into later of course. And although the path forwards is primarily set forwards, optional routes are possible if implemented in the game, but with more control over your character, you can move yourself into position and decide on which alternate paths you'd like to take, so there's a great manual element now added to third-person on-rails shooters. And 3, the character and reticule are one and the same. You personally control the movement of the character and or the reticule. These can be independent of each other or be linked, but ultimately both are required to progress through the stages and destroy your enemies. So, I hope that makes sense. Let's get into my top 14, strange number, but my top 14 third-person on-rail shooters, people. Let's go. Let's go, baby! Number 14, Super Thunderblade. I don't know why I said it like that. Super Thunderblade. In Super Thunderblade, your ship and your reticule are exactly one and the same thing. Wherever your ship moves, that's where you're shooting. Super Thunderblade for me is one of my earliest memories of an on-rail shooter. And it mixes it up a bit. You know, it plays sometimes like a classic shooter, but for the most part, you know, for most of the levels, you are from a behind the camera, on-rail, segmented helicopter, blasting tanks, aeroplanes, boats, you name it, it's probably in there. And Super Thunderblade I actually first experienced on the Sega Mega Drive. Now, a lot of people hate the Mega Drive version. Yes, it is inferior to the arcade version, but back then I couldn't give a crap. I had Super Thunderblade on a Sega Mega Drive and I played the crap out of it. I have played the arcade version, which is what you're seeing on the screen, which I've been playing on MAME, and Super Thunderblade is just awesome. It's difficult as hell. It's one of those arcade games that will make you pop in those coins like there's no tomorrow. But it's an awesome shooter, great soundtrack, early Sega, absolutely love it. Number 13, Galaxy Force 2. Ooh yeah. In Galaxy Force 2, a bit like Super Thunderblade, your ship and your reticule are pretty much one and the same thing. You can actually see your reticule in Galaxy Force 2, but wherever your ship is facing, if you're flying up or down, that's where the reticule moves, pretty much in tangent with the ship itself. Galaxy Force 2 is everything you want in a space shooter. Once again, I first played this on a Sega Mega Drive, later played it in the arcades, and it's the arcade footage you're seeing once again. But man, Galaxy Force 2, the soundtrack to this game is just so good. Classic Sega, once again, the sprites, the scaling in this game, oh man, it's just so good. Loads of varied levels, like you're flying over, you know, like suns and, you know, inside moons and stuff. I remember when I first played it back in the day on the Mega Drive, I never understood the fuel system. Basically, you're flying in this game and your fuel is counted down, so you best not get hit or crash into anything that will cause you to use fuel, because it'd be game over before you can blink. But man, once you get the hang of this game, it is so good. Graphically for this time, just staggering, absolutely staggering. Galaxy Force 2, people, such a good game. At number 12, Panzer Dragoon Orta. Number 12? Why is it so low? It's not low, it's number 12 out of 14 great games. I know it's Panzer Dragoon, but Orta is my least favorite, but it's still badass. What am I talking about? I'm going to talk about it now. Number 13. No. Number 12. Panzer Dragoon Orta. In Panzer Dragoon Orta, your reticule is actually attached to your character who's holding the gun on top of your dragon. This was established in the original Panzer Dragoon and is a freedom of movement with the reticule itself before the dragon actually moves in the direction that your reticule is moving to. I hate saying things like this is my least favorite in a series because it makes it almost like diminish this game, but Panzer Dragoon Orta, yes, it's my least favorite in the series, but Panzer Dragoon Orta is an incredible on-rail shooter full of stunning set pieces, and if you're a Panzer Dragoon fan like me, it's got some great lore material in there. There are a few things I didn't love about the game, like the instant morphing in order to do certain attacks and stuff to change the gameplay. I found it a bit cumbersome, but you get good at it and you find yourself moving through those morph styles in order to better suit your situation. But there's some great levels in this game, some great bosses. Once again, classic running bosses like the Panzer Dragoon series, flying over the clouds, taking down the Empire and the ancient bioweapons that plague the environment. Panzer Dragoon Orta is phenomenal and is 100% worth a play, people. Stunning game. At number 11, an OG. Afterburner. Sega Ages version I got. Perfect. In Afterburner, your ship and your reticule are one and the same. Wherever you move your ship, that's where the reticule follows. But with some additional tactical gameplay in effect, if you want to lock on with missiles with your Afterburner spacecraft, then you need to move that ship and the reticule over enemy ships to lock on and fire your additional missiles. It's hard to describe the impact Afterburner had on some of us back in the day, just sitting in that arcade machine. You were in the future, people. You were in the future. And yes, when I grew up as a kid, I was in a rotating Afterburner arcade machine like as much as I could. Absolutely insane. The sprite scaling in this game is just, I still play it today and I look at it, I'm just like, this is mental. Absolutely mental. It's just a blisteringly fast game. Difficult as hell. But keep playing it, you'll get better and better and get through some of these levels, and some of the levels look stunning. Absolutely stunning. Just be able to do your barrel rolls and stuff, and the camera spinning around. Man, it is literally Top Gun. Literally Top Gun. Just so good. So good. Winning to the number 10s, people. And number 10 on my Sega Ages again. Where is it to? Space Harrier. A Yu Suzuki classic. Number 10 is Space Harrier. Just like Super Thunderblade, although established before it, Space Harrier, your character and a reticule are one and the same. There is no reticule, you literally just see a character, and wherever your character is on the screen, that's the direction your bullets will be flying. Yes, I have put Space Harrier above Afterburner. I gave this a lot of thought. It was my first on-rail shooter game, and it was also the first on-rail shooter created by the arcade gods of Sega, and also it was one of the earliest games that got me into Sega way back in the 80s. Space Harrier, welcoming you to the fantasy zone. Once again, in the arcades, that arcade machine. I think it's this was another thing about the arcades. Back then, when you sat in these units, you were transported. There was nothing else around you. It was just you, that screen, and the arcade unit that you were sitting in, and you felt like you were piloting some futuristic spaceship. As a kid, it's just mind-blowing. But the sprite scaling in this game, The soundtrack. Just Yu Suzuki is a god. A god. A god. And he created some of the best games and the most impactful games ever made. Love Space Harrier to death. And I've got this on a Nintendo Switch as well as another version that I play. And number 9, we have Sin and Punishment. I don't own a physical copy of Sin and Punishment, but I got a digital on the Wii and the Wii U. Yeah, because I transferred it over to the Wii U, and they also put it on Switch Online. But Sin and Punishment is number 9. In Sin and Punishment, your character and your reticule are actually fully independent of each other. You control each one individually, so you have to concentrate on moving your character with one control set and moving the reticule with another control set, and this creates a dynamic dual stick control. Sin and Punishment was one of those N64 games we all saw back in the day, only released in Japan, and I was twitching to play it. Back then when we saw it in magazines and stuff, it graphically is one of the best N64 games I've ever seen back then. I was like, how do I get to play this game? I can't play it. But then Nintendo managed to release it on a Nintendo Wii, and I snapped it up in seconds. Finally played it. I was like, yo, this would have been one of my favorite N64 games. Would have been. Just so good. Graphically stunning. Immense diversity in the levels. A crazy story. Don't ask me to explain the story. I've never understood it. It's this typical wild, crazy, almost Evangelion anime. Like, it's just bonkers. But great on-rail shooters with loads of variety in the stages, and the forward motion just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Saki.
And number 8, so aggressive, Afterburner Climax. This game is so good. Only released digitally. I got it when it came out on the Xbox 360, so that's the footage you will see. In Afterburner Climax, just like the original Afterburner and also Space Harrier and Galaxy Force, your ship and your reticule are one and the same. Wherever you move your ship, that's where the reticule follows. But with some additional tactical gameplay in effect, if you want to lock on with missiles with your Afterburner's craft, then you need to move that ship and the reticule over enemy ships to lock on and fire your additional missiles. Afterburner Climax is the best Afterburner game. I don't care what anyone says. I rate it over the arcade original. I think this is one of the best successors and almost reboots ever made. And I don't think many people have played it. It was only released digitally. But it's got all the sensor speed of Afterburner. Loads of different aircraft, stunning levels, stunning, great difficulty. The difficulty is still there. Gameplay is just, it's phenomenal. You can speed up your ship and your airplane and stuff to get boosts, to go faster, go in slow motion. Using a climax mode just slows everything down. You can target multiple things. Absolutely incredible game. I hope they re-release it again. At some point, so it's not, because I think the Xbox 360 store is closing down soon now. But yeah, if you could play this game, give it a go. So good. It's getting good now, people. It's getting good. Number 7, the original Panzer Dragoon on the Sega Saturn. Almost where it all started, people. For me, that is. In terms of the Panzer Dragoon series. Not on rail shooters. You know what I'm talking about. Panzer Dragoon is number 7. As explained in Panzer Dragoon Orta, but obviously first created in Panzer Dragoon, your character's reticule is actually moved by the character sitting on top of your dragon and where it wants to point its gun, and eventually the dragon will follow that. But what Panzer Dragoon introduced as well, coming after Afterburner, was a lock-on system where you have to move that reticule over enemies in order to do your dragon's special laser blasts. I actually played the first Panzer Dragoon after I played Panzer Dragoon Zwei, and if anyone done that, you would see the difference between those games, you know, especially in the frame rate. You know, but Panzer Dragoon was one of those original Saturn games, one of those first 3D games that was just an achievement you had not seen on consoles before. It was also the first real intuitive take on modernizing the on-rail shooter, where you would actually be able now to actually move the camera around the player in 4 directions, being able to see what's attacking you on the left, on the right, what's behind you, and also what's in front of you. And the world of Panzer Dragoon, you know, the original game which we're talking about here, or just a whole series, but the original game, you know, it's a world that sings to my artistic art, the type of art styles that I love. And the art style for the original game was inspired by the artist Mobius, which I highly recommend checking out his work. But like I said, the only thing that holds this game back is the game's frame rate, probably. But as I said, at the time it was just an achievement, an absolute achievement, and I rate the original Panzer Dragoon, you know, up there with some of the greatest games and some of the most inspirational games ever made. Long live the Saturn. At number 6, Kid Icarus Uprising. What'd you say? This isn't an on-rail shooter? Please, let me explain. Kid Icarus Uprising is another dual stick shooter like Sin and Punishment, where your character is moved fully independent with the analog stick on the 3DS, and your reticule is used on the touchscreen for your targeting, so you got full control over both control setups, and it just works wonderfully on the 3DS. Kid Icarus Uprising is an on-rail shooter with on-the-ground third-person sections. Do you know why I call it an on-rail shooter more than anything else? First and foremost, it's because every single stage starts with an on-rail shooter section. And they are some of the best on-rail shooting sections in any on-rail shooting game ever. I put it at number 6 because its gameplay is 50-50, but there's no way that you cannot include this game as an on-rail shooter. Just no way. And when you got the 3D on in this game, my god, just too good. You know, Sakurai went to town on this game. The levels in this game, my god. Kid Icarus Uprising also has some of the best writing in Nintendo history. Perhaps the best, and it just makes you smile the whole time you're playing it as you're moving through these levels. You just can't help but laugh and smile, which is great when you're playing the game. I mean, how often does a game make you laugh and smile as you're playing it? Just a sight to behold. Graphically, one of the best games on the 3DS and one of the best games ever. Just so good.
Extreme.
At number 5, another Sin and Punishment game. This time the sequel. This game, people. This game. It's number 5. Sin and Punishment's Stark successor is a full-on sequel to Sin and Punishment, the original one, so the control setup is virtually identical. If someone wanted to put this game at number 1, I would have no arguments. No arguments whatsoever. It is easily one of the best third-person on-rail shooters ever, and just one of the best Wii games, one of the best games ever. I've played this game so much because the game itself has no real faults. The controls are great. You've got full movement around the screen, melee attacks, bosses are great fun. It's a visual tour de force on the Wii. Levels are great and diverse. Once again, the story is bonkers, but who cares about the story when you just having so much fun? Play Sin and Punishment successor now. At number 4, we have Lilac Wars on the N64. I feel Star Fox takes some inspiration from Afterburner, but its control setup is pretty much identical, where once again, wherever your ship is pointing, that's where the reticule on the screen will move as well. Both the ship and the reticule are tied together, with a slight delay in turning, a bit like Panzer Dragoon, but pretty much your ship and your reticule are one and the same. Lilac Wars or Star Fox 64 on the Nintendo 64, the greatest console ever made. Yeah, on my channel, the N64 is peak. Lilac Wars is just everything that you want in an on-rail shooter. Everything that you want. The levels are got great variety. You can mix up the vehicles for a different feel to many of the levels. Bosses are great fun. You got your wingmates. When this game came out, obviously we all experienced a Rumble for the first time. And the upgrades, you know, the graphical upgrade, my god, from Starwing, my god. I spoke about this game before. I love the reflections and everything. The N64 controller with the analog stick in this game is just, it's the only way to play the game. You can't use any other controller. N64 controller only, because that analog stick is made for this game. And Lilac Wars, I just got too many memories. Just too many memories with it. It's one of the best games ever made. One of the best N64 games. Just phenomenal. And just, remember that level? What stage is it? My brain. But anyway, it's basically Independence Day, and the saucer comes above the pyramids, all the spaceship stuff coming out. You know, within that era, you know, of like Independence Day and stuff. And you're just playing these levels. I just like, oh, this is amazing, amazing. Lilac Wars, people. At number 3, the top 3 now of my favorite on-rail shooters. Number 3 is Starwing. And Starwing, naturally becoming from Lilac Wars, uses the same system where your ship and the reticule are one and the same. I've said it before and I'll say it again. As much as I love Lilac Wars, I still prefer Starwing. The original Star Fox. I think for the SNES game, it's one of those games that set itself apart from the Mega Drive. I love the Mega Drive to death, but it had nothing like Starwing in the UK. And when Starwing came out, graphically, it was the most mind-blowing thing you'd ever seen in your life on a console. The music, Cornelia, start, the little jabbers, just, I love this game. It's one of my most evergreen games. I still play it to this day. Just play Starwing. You can get it anywhere. It's on a Switch. It's been on every Nintendo console pretty much. Just play it. Number two. What's my second favorite? Rez on the Sega Dreamcast. This game was the future. Rez is quite unique in its take on the third-person on-rail shooter in regards that your third-person character is primarily set within the center of the screen, but your target reticule can actually move full screen and also at times almost 360 fully around the character, depending on how the set pieces want you to navigate that control scheme. So it's a very unique one in the sense that you don't have any control over the character itself, but you can see your character and your full control is a reticule and ensuring none of the enemy's attacks reach your character at the center of the stage. When Rez came out, I said, and I still say, that this game is the future of video games. It encapsulated it, both in sight and sound. In sight, that wireframe computer world was like something out of the Lawnmower Man, Tron, all those films I grew up with that visualized virtual reality and stuff, or it'd be like going into cyberspace. Rez, graphically, I think, is one of those games that I would consider to be perfect. Its art style is perfect. These days they just put it into HD, up-res it, and it's still perfect. It finally got into VR, which I have regrettably yet to play, and it's meant to be perfect. The soundtrack to this game, man, how the music and the tempo changes both with your character reactions and as you move through each phase of the level. Just audio and visual perfection. I've done a whole video on it. One of the first videos I've done on my channel. Go and watch it after you've watched this video. Res is on every modern platform. Play it, people. One of the greatest third-person on-rail shooters. One of the greatest games ever made. In my top 10 games, people. In my top 10 games. Amazing. And at number 1, if anyone knows me, if anyone knows my gaming body. My gaming body. Number 1, Panzer Dragoon Zwei on the Sega Saturn. You got no idea. That's why I'm going to explain it to you. And just like the original Panzer Dragoon Zwei effectively allows you full control of view around the character itself. You can move the camera around full 4 directions of the character, and the reticule itself, once it gets attached to the character on top of the dragon, can still look fully around the screen, tagged in enemies in all directions essentially. But it's up to you to spin that camera around and ensure that you're not being attacked by enemies in whatever direction that they might be attacking you from. And you can see that by using the special radar on the screen that shows you where enemies are positioned around your dragon and its rider. Panzer Dragoon Zwei at number 1 is more than just a nostalgia thing for me. Panzer Dragoon Zwei, I consider peak 32-bit era, peak Saturn. It's got the soundtrack. The soundtrack is unlike anything you have heard in video games at that time. And I still argue even till now. Still remember to this day walking into my local game shop. The shop was called Game in capital letters, and I saw this demo. I also saw it in Toys R Us. I saw this demo of this boy riding this dragon, and he was flying through a forest, and he got to the end, and this big creature landed in front of him, roared, and then started galloping after him. I had never seen anything so mind-blowing in a video game in my entire life. I got that game for the Saturn. I still play it to this day. The story and the world is unlike anything you have experienced before. It is visual Saturn perfection. Looks absolutely stunning. The water, man, when you fly above the clouds, flying over Shellkoof, which is this giant ship in and out of his bowels, and then you fly out, shoot down some of his wings, running through the forest, a beast chasing you, fighting another dragon, the final boss music, the Saturn doing his VDP, infinite plains, so it feels like you got this stretch of desolate landscape ahead of you in a post-apocalyptic world. You got your new berserk attack, which lets you go nuts and destroy everything on screen for the short time, the lock-on sounds, the blast of the laser sounds, sounds of your gun, all those sound intricacies that I spoke about in my Panzer Dragoon video. Go and watch that after this video too. Panzer Dragoon Zwei, I consider to be the best third-person on-rail shooter ever. It's got everything. It's got the thrill, it's got the sights, it's got the gameplay, it's got the additional story, the music, graphics, and it's still only on the Sega Saturn. I don't care how you play it, original hardware, emulator, do whatever it takes, people. Play Panzer Dragoon Zwei. And that's it, people. Those are my favorite third-person on-rail shooters. So, I hope you understand now what third-person on-rail shooters are, or just on-rail shooters in general. Have you played many yourself? If you have, let me know. And if you haven't, well, you have a wonderful list of third-person on-rail shooters now to look at. And please, please give many of them, if not all of them, a try. This video turned out a lot longer than I expected, but I hope you made it to the end and I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, thanks for listening, take care all, and peace.